Hello, welcome to this video. So we are on to lesson 2 now of book 1. So I'm assuming you've kind of worked your way through the first lesson, and you've kind of got your head around the 3 main notes we're going to be working with: quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. Or we've already covered those in lessons at school or here or whatever. So what we're going to look at now is a bit more of the fun stuff. So we're going to look at building up our first what's called the first rock groove, pop groove, and we're going to do that using those 3 notes we've already learnt about. So we're going to start off with just all quarter notes for the groove, then we're going to just change the hi-hat up into 8th notes and 16th notes. So if we go over to our book, so here we go. Let's have a look at the first bit we're going to do. So our first rock groove, we're going to look at where the bass drum is going to be played, which is going to be on beat 1 and beat 3. So we've got a new note, first of all, a new note position we've not seen before, because we've only really looked at the note for the snare drum to start with. So if we look down here, we've got a quarter note, still got the note head and the stem coming off it. Now remember, the stem bit, the stick bits can point up or they can point down. It doesn't make any difference. Okay, it's just for neatness normally, so don't be confused by that. So we've got a quarter note on beat 1 and a quarter note on beat 3. We've got a weird squiggly thing here, which we may not have seen before if you're new to all this music reading thing. This is called a rest, and this is a quarter note rest. So a rest tells us when not to play. So a note tells us when to make some sound, and a rest tells us when not to make any sound, and where we rest. That's why it's called a rest. And each note has its own type of rest. So this is a quarter note rest. We would rest for 1 beat. Let's just bring this a little bit closer. So basically all we can do is, as we count him, as we count in 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to play just the bass drum on beat 1 and beat 3. Simple as that. So we just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, one more, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now unfortunately you can't see my foot. Basically I'm playing what's called a heel down technique. I talked in the last lesson about technique of hitting the drums with the hands. If you imagine that's the pedal and that is your foot, try and keep your foot on the pedal all the time for now. Okay, so you're not kind of slamming your whole leg down. You're not letting the beat bounce around as you play it. I always say, imagine you've sort of glued your shoe to the pedal and your foot kind of wants to be in contact with the pedal all the time, just to get that correct bass drum technique. I'll try and do some videos on bass drum technique at some stage, and I'll get the camera down there on my foot so you can see what I'm talking about. So that is the bass drum. Bass drum, also known as the kick drum. If you hear people talking about the kick drum and get confused, what's the difference between bass drum and kick drum? There is no difference. It's just a different name. Reason it's often referred to as a kick drum is that before pedals were invented, the drummer would kick that drum, or the bass drum. Okay, so that's why. The snare drum is going to be playing what's called the backbeat, which is basically the opposite beat to the bass drum. So you can see the note has now moved up to our snare drum line here. And it's playing on the opposite notes. So whereas the bass drum plays on the odd numbers, the snare drum is going to play on the even numbers. So that's why we've got a rest on 1 and 3, snare drum note on 2 and 4. We're going to be playing this with, I'm assuming that we're set up right-handed. If you're set up left-handed, just reverse everything. Okay, so for a right-handed drummer, we're going to be playing the snare drum with the left hand. Just going to go like this, dead simple. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, very easy. But get into the habit of counting, so you're making sure you're keeping it all nice and in time. So what we're now going to do is we're going to take those bass drum and snare drum parts, put them together, and we will get this. So we've got rid of our rests now because we've filled our bar up with 4 quarter notes. So it's going bass drum, snare drum, bass drum, snare drum. So for a right-handed drummer, it's going to be right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. Now I know some people are left-handed and still play right-handed. I generally kind of say when you're a drummer, you shouldn't be left-handed or right-handed. You're going to try and be as equally strong in both hands. So you want to try it all different ways round. But assuming we're on a right-handed setup drum kit, it's going to be right foot, left hand for this bit. Okay, again, keeping in time with the metronome, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's bass drum, snare drum, bass, snare. Worth practicing that and building the speed up, because you might find as you get faster, your hands and foot will want to go together. So it's just working on that coordination between the foot hand and foot hand. And again, bear in mind, you don't really need a drum kit for this bit. Okay, we've got one built in on our body. Here's your snare drum. Your right leg is your right knee is your snare drum. So left hand is going to be over on right leg, because we're going to do the hi-hat in a bit. And you just go in foot, hand, foot, hand. As you do that, make sure you keep your foot flat on the ground and you're kind of rocking backwards and forwards on your heel like that. So you're just tapping your toes down, just like you're tapping your foot along to a piece of music. And it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, simple as that. Right, if we move on then to our next thing. Now, if we look at our quarter notes now, we've got something that looks rather different. We've got a cross. The note head is now turned into a cross, and it's right up here sitting above the top line. Now, if we think about our drum kit, it's actually made up of 2 different instruments. It's made up of drums that we've been playing so far, and it's made up of the cymbals. We've got ride cymbal, crash cymbal, and so on. They're part of the same instrument family, but technically they're different instruments in the same way as like a trumpet and a trombone are brass instruments, but they are different instruments. These are percussion instruments. So a drum kit is kind of made up of 2 different percussion instruments. So all the cymbals are written with a cross, so that when they're all put together, it's a little bit easier to spot straight away your cymbals from your drums. So when we get this cross sitting above the top note line here, still a quarter note because it's still got the single line coming off it. So a cross like that is our hi-hat. Now, we're not talked about the hi-hat yet, so this is this thing over here. Let's just get this a little bit bigger. So on an acoustic drum kit, the hi-hat is the 2 cymbals that sit over this side. One is that way around, one is that way around, and as you press down on the pedal, it kind of squeezes the cymbals together. So when your foot's off the pedal, they're apart like that, and that's an open hi-hat, which is going to sound like that. And when you push your foot down the pedal, it squeezes them together to make that closed hi-hat sound. Okay, so this one's electronic, it doesn't move, but you'll see that on an acoustic drum kit. So if we go back to our notes, this here, when it's a cross on its own, is closed, because we play the hi-hat closed more often than we play it open. We'll get into open hi-hats later on, but there will be a circle around it or above the note, which will mean it's an open. So this is dead easy. We're playing all 4 quarter notes, but with the right hand. So we're now going to have this position. Okay, so your left hand is, or let's start with your right hand. Your right hand's going to go over the top of your left hand. So he crossed over like that. And as we play, eventually putting all the things together, we're going to go that way around. So always remember, make sure your left hand is underneath. If you get that way around, obviously, you're going to hit your stick roll on the drum because it's the wrong way around. So just thinking about it, it's that way. So bring the metronome back on. This is dead easy. It's just going to play on all 4 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just bring this back up. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Ridiculously easy, that bit. Now comes the fun bit. We're going to put them together. So we're going to take those hi-hats, as you can see here, and put them together with the bass drum and snare drum. So we've now got notes lined up on top of each other, okay, vertically like this. If they're lined up on top of each other, that means we're going to play them at the same time. So our first beat is telling us to play our hi-hat, which is this note here, and our bass drum at the same time, which would sound like this. Okay, those 2 are going to go together. Our second beat, we've got the hi-hat again, because remember the hi-hat is going through on all 4 beats, is the snare drum. So that's going to be your hands together. So what I would do, first of all, don't dive straight in and try and play it straight away. Practice those 2 notes separately. So there's your first one. So you might just want to just get used to playing that a few times. Okay. And then just go into that second one. Okay, just to get used to doing those individually. And then you're basically just going to do one after the other. So you're going to go. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the important thing to remember is when you're doing that first beat, you're not getting the snare drum. You're not getting all 3 playing together. And when you're playing the second beat, your foot doesn't play when you play the hands. So if you think about the bits we're playing separately, we've got the hi-hat is just going all the way through. So you don't need to think about that one as much. And then as you're playing that, you're going foot, hand, foot, hand. Okay, and that is your first rock groove. Okay, so start it really, really slowly, thinking about those hands and feet, then gradually start to speed it up. Usually, or not usually, you should always use a metronome to keep you in time. Again, you can practice that without a drum kit. Left knee is your hi-hat. Let's get this a bit bigger so hopefully you can see. Left knee is your hi-hat. Right knee is your snare drum. Start with your left hand, going over onto your right knee, and then your right hand over the top, and then you can just practice that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And a good way about doing it this way is you can actually watch your foot to make sure your foot doesn't play when your hands play, and make sure that hand doesn't play when your foot plays. Also, kind of just air drumming, just 1, 2, 3, 4. Because as we said before, at this stage it's all about just getting that coordination, getting everything to kind of play when you want it to play, not when it wants to play on its own. Okay, so that's your first rock groove with the quarter notes. What we're going to do for the next one, that might take you a while to get that, so I wouldn't move on to the next one until you've got that. Just take it steady, don't rush into it too soon. So we're going to now look at probably the most common bit of drumming that we're ever going to learn, and the most important bit of drumming we're ever going to learn, because this groove here is kind of like in a gazillion songs, and with different variations is in a gazillion more songs. Basically, all we've changed is the hi-hat. The hi-hat is now playing eighth notes all the way through. So you can see the bass drum is still on 1 and 3, the snare drum is still on 2 and 4. That hasn't changed. The hi-hat is now playing eighths. So the hi-hat is now playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And if we put it all together, we get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. Okay, so hopefully you can see that I'm still counting the 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm putting ands in between each number. And every time we say and, we should be hitting the hi-hat on its own. So for this one, go really, really, and I mean really slow, even like going 1 and then think about what you've got to play. 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, keep going through that sort of speed. Keep repeating it round and round. So when you get to the end of the line here, straight back into beat 1 again. Just try and loop it round a few times. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and straight back to beat 1. 1 and. Okay, so it's a constant loop of sound. As you get more comfortable with it, then you want to just gradually start to speed it up. And then it'll start here. That's sounding like a groove. Sorry, I'm getting Facebook notifications down here. Go away. You'll start to hear it. Okay, sounding more like a groove that you would sort of recognise. Takes a little bit of practice, that one, to get it going. So take it steady. A good way of doing it is, again, break it down, as we've said on other things, break it down into small chunks. So you might want to practice just your first, just this bit, first of all. Just like beat 1. So like 1 and. Then practice beat 2. 2 and. Again, let's just get this up a little bit bigger. So then 2 and. And then you might want to put those together but leave a little gap in between. So like 1 and then think about it, and then 2 and then try and close that gap up. 1 and 2 and. And then before you know it, you'll be rocking, you'll have that groove. Practice that one as much as you can, because like I say, that is probably the most important bit of drumming that you're ever going to learn at this stage. And then for the last one, we do the same thing. We're going to put 16ths on the hi-hat. Now, everyone always looks at this one and thinks, oh, that's going to be really hard because there's all these notes. Generally, I find this one is probably easier than the last one, just purely because you've got more going off in between on your hi-hat beats. So instead of having one hi-hat beat in between the bass drum and snare drum, as we had on this one, just here, there, okay, we've now got 3 hi-hat beats. Okay, so we're now going to go like this. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4. Again, counting so you know where your 1 is, and your 2, your 3 and the 4. 3 E and 4 E and 1. Okay, again, fairly straightforward once you've got it going. If you can play this one, okay, the 8th note one, this one should be a breeze to be able to play. Can't stress enough how important it is that you count while you play, so you know where you are. Try and get into that habit of counting right from day one, because it does help. I don't say this stuff for the sake of it. It does help to count, so you know where you are. Because you're counting those 16ths, so you've got to remember is your foot's got to play on beat 1 and beat 3, and your snare drum on beat 2 and beat 4. And then the last thing for this one, because this one's going to get fairly lengthy otherwise, is just an exercise to practice kind of switching between different hi-hat beats, really. So as we look at this, it's, again, the software I used to write it on, it's a bit annoying because that looks like a really small bar, so it almost looks like it should be going like this. It Okay, almost sort of slowing down because the spaces get wider between these notes. But it's not. It should be the same speed all the way through in terms of these quarter notes. And it's kind of not a bad thing that is in there, because it will make you kind of read the notes rather than looking at how they're spaced out. So we got to remember is these are all quarter notes, right? All these black notes here are all quarter notes. So the space between all of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that should always be the same. What is changing every bar, though, is the hi-hat, which is going to switch between eighths, quarters, sixteenths, and so on. So if I just play this through, hopefully you can hear what it should sound like. Then you can kind of rewind this and have a go at playing it through with me, or get it off the audio file. I'll go reasonably slow. I'll try it at 60, so we're not going too fast. But obviously, before you try and do all this, make sure you've mastered the 3 grooves individually before you put them all together. Okay, so this is what this one should sound like. 3, 4. So quarters on the hi-hat, into eighths, sixteenths. Go back to eighths. Second line. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that the bass drum and the snare drum are following that metronome all the way through. They're not changing, it's the hi-hat that's changing. So there's quite a lot in this lesson to sort of master, and quite a lot of important stuff to master as well. So please don't kind of rush through it and move on too soon onto the next bit until you've got it, particularly that 8th note groove, this second one here, because we're going to be using that one a lot in future lessons. So yeah, take your time, practice, practice, practice. Once you've got it, it's dead easy. You've got it for life. You won't forget it. It's like learning to ride a bike. It's just getting that coordination going. So I hope that's okay, and you've enjoyed watching this video. Good luck with your practice. And I say with practice, like often practice sessions is better than like one massive long 3-hour practice session, because you'll get bored doing that. When you're first starting out, I mean, obviously by all means play as much as you want, but 3 or 4 times a week, just 5 or 10 minutes, just working through those grooves is a great starting point, and then ramp that up as you learn more and more stuff. So thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, obviously stick them in the comments box below, message me direct, and I'll do my best to reply to any questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.